The world couldn't believe it last December when Syria's Assad regime, after decades of iron-fisted rule, suddenly fell like a house of cards. The speed of that collapse exposed how the state had been hollowed out on the quiet. 8 months on, how weak does Syria remain? The government forces of Ahmed Alshara pulling out from the Druze-majority city of Sweida after bombardment from neighbouring Israel and pressure from the United States that's only recently offered Damascus a lifeline through the lifting of years-old crippling sanctions. So what did just happen in Sweida? What with reports of summary executions of civilians? And how will other minorities, like the Kurds and the Alawites, view what just happened? Why the climb down by Damascus? Looming large, Israel, with its own Druze community and its own agenda for perennial foes, Syria, Lebanon, and the Gaza Strip. Is war the only way for a nation that's occupied the Golan Heights since 1967 and now enjoys a clear military advantage over all of its neighbors? Today in the France 24 debate, Damascus on the back foot. With us, France 24 Damascus correspondent Dana Albaz, straight from the Syrian capital to the editing booth upstairs. You're preparing a story for Reporters, the investigative news magazine. What's it on?
I can't talk about it yet.
Okay, surprise. That's it. Talk about a teaser. Thanks for being with us. Thanks as well to Samir Aita, president of the Arab Economists Circle think tank. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Nadim Houri, executive director of the Arab Reform Initiative think tank. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Francois.
And joining us from Isfahan in Israel, he's an Israeli Druze citizen who served several tours as ambassador in Central and South America. Reda Mansour, professor of Middle East Studies at Reichman University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good evening, all.
If you're on the go, by the way, you can listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, the gun's going silent, but plenty of destruction, plenty of death, more than 500 killed. Half of them allied with the government in Damascus, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, and still a lot of tension. Lisa Kamenov has more.
A solemn promise to protect Syria's Druze religious minority by Syria's interim leader after days of deadly clashes in the southern province of the country.
I especially address our Druze brethren, who are an integral part of this nation's fabric. Syria will never be a place for division, fragmentation, or sectarian strife. We affirm that protecting your rights and freedoms is among our top priorities.
Hundreds have been killed in clashes between Bedouin tribes and Druze fighters in recent days, but witnesses say government forces sided with Bedouins in attacking Druze gunmen and civilians. In his speech, interim leader al-Sharaa vowed that those responsible for the violence would be held accountable. He also said local officials would take over security responsibilities.
We assigned local factions and Druze spiritual leaders the responsibility of maintaining security in Sweida, recognising the need to avoid dragging the country into a new wide-scale war.
The latest clashes are the deadliest since April and May, when government forces and Druze fighters faced off in Sweida, leaving over 100 people dead. Early on Wednesday evening, a stream of Syrian government convoys and tank carriers could be seen leaving the city of Sweida. Israel, home to 150,000 Druze, had demanded a withdrawal of government troops from the south. On Wednesday, it intensified its attacks by targeting Syrian army headquarters in central Damascus. Al-Sharaa said that the Israeli strikes could have evolved into a wider conflict in the region if it wasn't for international mediation.
Yeah, we'll ask about the dynamic with Israel on this day after those startling images. But first, Dana Albaz, have you had any news from Sweida this Thursday? Was the truce holding?
According to the information that we have, there are a lot of fake information that are circulating now in Sweida, a lot of tension currently in Sweida. As the information that we could collect and we could verify, maybe few clashes, we could say like very restricted clashes has been happening this morning, but other than that, we could say that the tension is still here and people are still asking, would the ceasefire and this accord will be held. So all of people that we could speak to this morning in Sweida, they are asking about this. We could say that they are still worried about the situation in Sweida.
Yeah, and this is the second flare-up, as was told in that report. There was a first one in the spring, and this was at the start of it over the weekend. A confrontation between the Druze, who are a majority in that city, and Bedouin tribesmen.
Exactly, and this is why if we speak about civilians in Sweida, they were fearing from as well from revenge acts in Sweida today, even after the ceasefire and after the appeal to calm things down. We had some information about as well some Bedouin families leaving Sweida as well. A lot of Druze families as well were obliged as well to leave their houses. We have been seeing a lot of crimes that are being committed against civilians, against everyone in Sweida.
Yeah, I'll break it down for you what the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said. This is their toll. They're saying 79 Druze fighters killed, 154 civilians, some of them summarily executed, 83 of those summarily executed. The clash is also claiming the lives of 243, what they describe as government personnel, and 18 Bedouin fighters. So more than half of those killed are from when the orders came from Damascus to send in government forces, it looks like.
Definitely. I mean, there's still a lot of things we don't know about what happened in the ground, but the general pattern is clear. A lot of those, I mean, there was fighting going on. There were a lot of those killed on the government side were killed as well by Israeli airstrikes. There were obviously the strikes that you showed in Damascus, but there were also strikes in Sweida. I think today the big fear is, yes, this is a setback today for al-Sharaa and for the Damascus authorities. Under pressure from Israel, they had to withdraw. But the big concern now is to see the sort of sectarian violence and forms of displacement as Druze are pushed out from areas where they are a minority to sort of Sweida, and as well some of the tribal Arabs who live around Sweida being pushed out. You get into a cycle. You know, I looked at social media today of Syria, the level of incitement, hatred, real, but also being pushed through fake bots. We don't know who's pushing them. Very, very high. A lot of fake videos, some true videos of reprisals of different sides. But I think it's just a very dangerous mix. And as usual, I think Israel scores tactical goals, but strategically only makes things worse, in my view.
We'll get to Israel in a moment. Let me first ask you, though, Samir Aita, again, since last December and the fall of the Assads, we've seen this with the Alawites, we've seen this with the Kurds, and we've seen it now a second time with the Druzes. How weakened is Ahmed Alshara after this episode?
You know, the situation today is really a turning point. We have, on one hand, an explosive social situation in Syria with all what they are saying, because the will of revenge of a lot of communities is there, and this was a major mistake that al-Sharaa and his lieutenants made to let Faza, what we call in Arabic Faza, all the guys who want to fight to go there and commit crimes. So everybody want to take revenge, and it's very difficult with now the withdrawal of any police force to handle the situation. Retreat imposed by the Israelis after the killing of the forces. The second aspect of this is what Netanyahu has made. If you take the things both from government side and from the majority of the Syrian people, 3 months ago, everybody wanted to make a peace with Israel at any cost. Today, Netanyahu destroyed this eventuality, weakening Sharaa, who cannot sell any peace anymore for, let's say, for years with the Israelis. This means that the plans of Netanyahu and his calculation by bombing the center of Damascus will lead to maybe an idea of Netanyahu different to make his only Jewish state holding by dividing Lebanon, dividing the Syrians, and let them kill each other.
Rewind the clock, Reda Mansour, to just last Saturday. And in Azerbaijan's capital, there were direct talks between Israeli and Syrian envoys. This was in Baku on the sidelines of a visit there by President Alshara. Do you agree with Samir Aita that the chances of a thaw have been thwarted for good now?
I don't think so. You know, it depends in the end what this new government in Syria wants. I was very optimistic, actually. I was very happy to hear the news from Azerbaijan. I've been studying Syria for 25 years. I wrote a PhD thesis about Syrian modern history. I wanted to this country finally get out of its instability that went on for decades. The problem with this new Syrian government is that they are living in two different worlds. There's the world of diplomatic activities and declarations, and there's the world on the ground. And the problem is that I don't really understand President Alshara. If you really want to stabilize Syria, and if you really want to have a peace with Israel and good relationship with the Gulf countries, why would you send this new military, which is supposedly called military, but we all know that this new Syrian military is just groups of former jihadis that came with him from Al-Qaeda to ISIS to Jabhat al-Nusra to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. These people, most of them are radicals. And for them, anybody who's not a Sunni jihadi Muslim is heretic and should be killed. So why would you send this kind of forces to Sweida? Well, you know what's going to happen.
What was the alternative? What could he have done?
Alternative is simple. Sweida is the periphery in Syria. It doesn't harm the new government or threaten it in any way. And he has too much job to do than starting now to oppressing minorities. He needs to rebuild this country. He has 11 million displaced Syrians and refugees.
Right, but you had a situation, as was described by Dana, where you had the standoff between these Bedouin tribesmen and Druze militias. What do you do when you're the central government in Damascus and you're trying to restore law and order? How do you go about it in these times?
The Bedouins has been using this opportunity, and they turned the Sweida-Damascus road into this bounty area where they attack daily the Druze cars and trucks. They steal them, they kidnap people to ask for a ransom. And so the problem is with the Bedouin tribes. And so if you want to protect the Druze, you go to the Sweida-Damascus road and you try to make it secure for movement from Damascus to Sweida. You don't go and circle Sweida province from 360 degrees with forces of jihadi fighters. Bring with you the Bedouins. The Bedouins came with these fighters. And like it was said before, they did faza from 17 provinces of people in the social media that were saying, let's go and wipe the heretic Druze. So, and when they arrived in Sweida, their least concern was to protect the Druze. They came to burn holy places, to shave the mustaches of 80 years old Druze elder men, and basically to have an Idlib style Islamic jihadi atmosphere. And this is something that the Druze will never accept. The Druze will not live under jihadi Islamic government. And if he's real about building a new Syria, he has to take that into consideration.
Dana Albers, I'll put the question to you. What were the alternatives for Ahmed Alshara when there was this flare-up over the weekend?
Yes, and let's speak about what you just said about the Kurds, about the Alawites, about the minorities, as we say in Syria. Certainly, the situation in Syria is pretty chaotic in this moment. There is a lot of chaos, and we certainly know that new authorities now, they don't really yet have this army, and they can't really control over the situation with this, with like real control of the situation. But would the answer to protect all civilians in Syria be by Israel attacking Damascus, or Israel doing airstrikes and strikes that we know, hundreds of strikes from Israeli side since the fall of Bashar al-Assad? Would this be the answer of the problem today in Syria? Netanyahu has said it clearly that he aims as well from these military operations in Syria to have the southern of Syria without any kind of military and arm in this area.
He wants it demilitarized.
Exactly. So this is something that we cannot really forget. And we do not forget as well that Druze themselves in southern Syria and Sweida as well, there is a lot of division, and they are not all agree on speaking with Israel or maybe getting some help from Israel as well. We have many factions as well, many armed groups in Sweida and in the Druze area, and they are not all okay.
Those religious leaders divided inside of Syria, they seem to be also divided beyond Syria itself. There are Druze present in Israel, but also in Lebanon and in Jordan. We saw most notably that it was a very cautious reaction from Lebanon's political leader of the Druze, Walid Jumblat.
Yeah, I think Walid Jumblat has been very worried to see the Druze in Syria sort of following the sirens of Israel, given Lebanon's own experience where the Maronites had their sort of engagement with the Israelis in the 80s and ended up badly for everyone involved. Look, I think clearly, to go back, what was the alternative? Ahmed Alshara has been making a lot of mistakes in this transition.
And by the way, you were here for the show we did on the Kurds, and the conclusion was you can't solve Syria's problem with a one-day conference.
Yeah, clearly he's not engaging. Clearly, their maximalist position, sort of centralizing everything. He's not able to attract what you want to call sort of the peripheries, because it's not only the minorities, there are also other groups, including some Sunni groups in the peripheries, that are feeling excluded. So that's definitely on him. But we also have to recognize that, frankly, Israel has been destabilizing this transition, particularly with the Druze, because they have pushed, notably, the most important spiritual leader of the Druze, al-Hajri, to really push for very maximalist positions. So we have to look at why this agreement that was signed in late spring, basically in early May, why did it not hold, and why did it get to the point where we are? And I think there's a lot of responsibility. Clearly, I think what Samir was saying is true. The moment that it was a major mistake of Ahmed Alshara to basically say, send these troops knowing full well that, they're not disciplined, that there is a lot of, they've been riled up now for months and months and months. But the issue is, how do you de-escalate now? And what is the role of the international community and the regional actors? It just seems that there are quite a few regional actors that are happy to see Syria burn and that are happy to see this sort of sectarian narrative take over, including through dynamics, because this will keep Syria very weak, very divided. That's the big challenge today.
It's interesting on that score because we have heard, we talk about Israel as a hegemon, but we also have in parts Turkey, which is a hegemon. Samir Aita, the Anadolu news agency, quoting officials in Ankara as stating that their foreign minister, Hakan Fidan, mediated, and here you see him alongside the Syrian interim president, but also the head of military intelligence, Ibrahim Kalin, who, quote, held multiple talks with counterparts in the U.S., Syria, and Israel. So Turkey's president, on the one hand, blasting Israel over what happened, but on the other, he's claiming that he played mediator to cool it down.
Yes, but before going to that, if you allow, there is a major problem that with the explosive situation of Syria today, you need a lot of wisdom and a lot of inventive, creative solutions. If you remember what happened with the coastal area when there was similar things against the Alawis, what did the US do? They brought Mazloum Abdi, the head of SDF, to sign an agreement with al-Sharaa. The agreement was not applied. There is a big responsibility on the US today to make this move of creativity by aligning the forces of the SDF with the forces of the government, because al-Sharaa today is somehow weak. Even towards his own constituency, there was clashes in Homs with all these muds who wanted to take revenge from the Druze. And they clashed with the security forces. And there were people killed even today. To get back to Turkey,
Because back in December, we were wondering, is Israel going to be now that Iran's been pushed out, is it going to be Israel the dominant player in Syria, or is it going to be Turkey, was kind of the question back in December?
Yes. There were even news today about Hakan Fidan talking with al-Hijri, the Druze leader. But he had to talk with him before that all this happened. The silence of Turkey on the issue is enormous, because at a certain point there was discussions between Turkey and Israel on somehow the separation of influence in Syria, and somehow Turkey appeared as the main backer of the regime. So the blow up on al-Sharaa is also a blow up on all what Turkey has been doing in the last...
So why are they claiming then we're the ones who mediated?
I think to be convincing, they have to do a lot more. In the sense of the creative solutions, I was putting the US responsible of bringing the two main forces, which means al-Sharaa and the SDF, together to stabilize the solution, because the situation today in Syria is really socially explosive. And I don't know what Netanyahu will want to play, not only with the Druze. He's playing with the Sunnis and etc. Look at the social media of the Israeli guys who were making problems to the Lebanese. Now they are pushing the Sunni and others divide.
Let's remind our viewers, Sweida, 140 kilometers from the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. On Wednesday, in fact, Israeli police had to cross into Syrian territory and convince and cajole Israeli Druzes to return to their side of the border. Not all border fences get the same treatment on the part of Israel. Seen this Thursday in the Golan Heights, one day after the guns went silent in Sweida. We can show you images. Look at these two elderly people crossing over into Syria, thanks to a hole in said border fence. Your reaction, Reda Mansour, to those images, and to why did Israel, we understand bombing the government forces that are advancing, but why bomb the defense ministry in Damascus?
Well, first of all, I want to remind everyone that the central part of our story tonight should be that there was a genocide done by the Syrian military in the Druze community of Sweida. Horrible, horrible scenes of soldiers with uniforms executing people in the streets, in the hospitals, burning Druze holy places. As a Druze here in this panel, I can't disconnect my emotions knowing that all of this was happening there, and then criticize Israel for playing strategic games in Syria. Without the Israeli intervention, they would not have stopped this genocide. They would have controlled the province and started to do what they did in the coast, People think that thousands of Alawites, maybe up to 20,000 Alawites were killed. The Druze will not allow this to happen. And that's why we needed the Israeli intervention. It wasn't an issue of strategic deliberation. Is it good for politics? Is it good for Israeli-Syrian relationship? You had to stop an ongoing genocide. Now, why did they bombard the Ministry of Defense? It was very clear. The Minister of Defense in Israel said it on TV. We are going to do a gradual attacks. And each time that the Syrian government does not stop the operation, we will have more severe attacks. So they started by attacking those government forces in Sweida. Julani or al-Sharaa did not respond. Then they started to attack bases of his forces in other provinces in Syria. He did not respond. So they understood that in the end, that maybe he does not understand the severity of the situation, and he need to see something close to his home, and they chose this very symbolic place. Is it good for a long-term strategic development between Israel and Syria? Maybe it's less, but to stop a genocide, you have to do something dramatic. I hope that al-Sharaa gets some senses and understand that the Druze are the least of his problems. He need, as the members of the panel said, he need to start talking to minorities, talk to the Kurds, talk to the Alawis, to the Druze, try to bring them on board. All of them want to be part of this new Syria. Don't give them this feeling that they can't trust you. He needs to be much more active and understanding the history of Syria. By the way, this is not new. The same scenario that is happening now happened in the 50s. In 1954, President Adib Shishakli sent an air force to attack Sweida to suppress minorities. And it didn't work. You can't suppress 35% of your population. You have to talk to them. You have to bring them on board. You have to show them that you didn't replace one sectarian government with another sectarian government. They want to be a part of this new government. So I hope after this, he will understand. And Israel, I think, here did the morally demanded action. Israel could not leave the Druze being slaughtered. And by the way, Sweida is only 70 kilometers from the border. And there are Druze villages. There are Druze villages who are 5 kilometers and 10 kilometers from the border, who also in the past suffered from Jabhat al-Nusra, which is Julani's organization.
But do you agree with the panelists that this could be a military success, but in the long term, it's not a smart move on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu if he wants stable relations with his neighbors?
Are you telling me that we have to think about a move to stop a genocide, not a smart move? Like, how can I accept this? Netanyahu did what he has to do. It's not his decision only. It's the decision of the Israeli security establishment, who owe the Druze, who feel obliged to respond. Don't forget that the Druze in Israel 2 days ago blocked all major highways in Israel. There was a great and tremendous cry out for Israeli intervention. And for us, if Israel did not do that, we would have been very disappointed in the same time. And I don't think that's for the interest of Israel to have a peace agreement or any kind of agreement with a government that still acts on a jihadi mode. He still have thousands of foreign jihadis from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan.
Are you against the fact that Donald Trump lifted the economic sanctions on Syria?
I think it was done too soon. I think that they had first to ask him to prove that he's serious about taking care of the minorities, because I know that Donald Trump asked him to take care of the minorities in Syria, and he promised to do so. He even said it last night in his discourse, al-Sharaa. He keeps repeating it in speeches, but he doesn't do anything about it on the ground. The sanctions were lifted too quickly. He got a very big prize without having to do anything for it. So I hope that now Saudi Arabia and President Trump and Israel and Turkey and everybody else make sure that Syria can't get more and more privileges without fulfill its obligations.
All right, Samir Aita, you mentioned there the United States as a mediator. Do you agree with that, that the sanctions were lifted perhaps too soon?
No, but first, I understand Mr. Rida as Israeli Druze, his face solidarity with the Druze of Syria, who were really massacred in some situations. But the argument on that Israel has to intervene because of this, quote, genocide, doesn't stand. Because on one hand, Israel is committing genocide in Gaza and the West Bank. Why the Israelis did not intervene when the Alawis were massacred in a much bigger way? If the only
well, because there was a pressure from domestic constituents, as Reda Mansour was just saying, that the Druze community in Israel is worked up about this.
I don't believe that Benjamin Netanyahu cares about human life, being Druze or Alawis or Sunnis or even Jews. He cares about his crazy plan of changing completely the Middle East. And this is why, on the issue of sanctions, by the way, which the sanctions had not been lifted completely. There is only announcements. Myself, I had a transfer from Deutsche Welle, your German competitor, public.
Colleagues, we don't call them
colleagues, yes. Yeah, but
alter egos.
Just for the fees of the travel, and because it was written in the transfer, Syria, to get 300 euros for reimbursing the plane ticket, I discussed for 3 days with the banks what sanctions had been lifted by. So this is a play by the Israelis today in Netanyahu, saying he's still a terrorist, while Sharaa was making all the nice eyes to say, we will go with you, to say, don't lift the sanctions. But this is a game. This is what Netanyahu wants is Lebanon, Syria, and maybe others under coercion.
Maybe we can talk about Israeli presence in the buffer zone and in the Golan Heights as well.
Right.
We have been witnessing Israeli incursions since December in Quneitra and in Daraa as well, and we have been witnessed as well a lot of combats as well that happened in Daraa as well. I have been myself to southern Syria, and I have met with agriculturists, and I have met with many people, and we haven't been able, us as journalists, to have access to Quneitra and to document what's going on the ground.
How else can you?
Can I just say something? Because I find it offensive that we talk about Israel as a humanitarian actor while they're committing genocide. And frankly, Israel has been negotiating and getting what it wants from the new Damascus authorities, and they never got any guarantees. So suddenly that somehow they're not been involved where they've actually been negotiating. As you mentioned, the day before the attacks, they were actually sitting with the new government, giving them new credibility. So let's just, Israel is doing, actually Netanyahu is doing what he thinks is in Israel's interest, which I think is dividing and further increasing. I am also worried about something else. I mean, all of us, I think, around this table want to see as well all killing of civilians in Syria stop. But I mean, where was Israel when Assad was gassing his own people, or when other minorities? So I think that doesn't resonate very, very far. But just, I think there's a very important point here to I think that we need to highlight. There's a real danger here. Sweida is not actually contiguous. I mean, you looked at the map. It is not actually right by the Israeli border. What happens tomorrow if you have, and this is, I think, the biggest fear we have, a sort of sectarian society-on-society forms of violence between Bedouin tribes and armed Druze gunmen, right? Israel is not going to intervene on the ground. They might bomb, but it's easier to bomb in Ministry of Defense than bomb just a bunch of groups. What are you going to do then? Everyone's going to watch. You're sort of elevated the risk factor, including for Druze today, because now a lot of, what we're seeing on social media, a lot of Syrians who actually support al-Sharaa saying, look, these are Umala Israeliyin, they're like agents of Israel. And then Israel is pushing, they're doing like typical sort of trying to put like a Star of David on a Druze flag and having images run on social media, just sort of creating a bigger problem. I think we need to, I mean, if the international community, particularly those who've actually been supporting Sharaa in his transition, have a direct responsibility, I fully agree with Samir Aita on this, to lead to a more inclusive process right now, to ensure that the accountability process that started with the investigation for the massacres in the coastal areas against the Alawites, actually the results are credible and are published and people are held accountable. That there's a process to de-escalate the situation now and actually engage a real internal Syrian dialogue with some international sponsorship, not on Israel's terms to say, you don't have to worry about the southern part of your country, we can do whatever we want, but to actually have a Syrian dialogue where the center gives something to the regions and the regions rejoin a national project. Otherwise, I think Syria is heading to a very dangerous spot.
Well, you heard Samir Aita mention the United States on Wednesday before that ceasefire announcement had finally taken hold. It was still touch and go 24 hours ago. Here's how the Secretary of State was framing the crisis.
These are historic, long-time rivalries between different groups in the southwest of Syria, Bedouins, the Druze community, and it led to an unfortunate situation and a misunderstanding, it looks like, between the Israeli side and the Syrian side.
A misunderstanding between the Israeli side and the Syrian side. Dana Albers, is that just diplomacy on the part of Marco Rubio, or does that highlight something else? What do you think of those words?
I don't know how to comment actually on these words, but what I can say that Syrians today and Druze as well, I will repeat it again, that they don't really we cannot talk about Druze as one group. We cannot say that Druze in Syria, that they are waiting from Israel to protect them. This is something that I would really highlight, because I have been talking to a lot of people and we cannot really talk about Druze as one group.
Syria is not Israel, is not Lebanon. In Lebanon, each community has its leader or 2 or 3 leaders that you can negotiate with. No community in Syria has a leader, not a city. Homs, who is the leader of Homs? Who is the leader of Druze? The situation is much more complex. This is why the solution, like what Nadim was talking, need a lot of dialogue, a lot of inclusion, including of the Kurds, including a lot of wisdom and creativity, as I told earlier.
Which frankly, we're not seeing from the Americans. I mean, the Americans were throwing the Kurds under the bus, right, just a few days ago. I mean, there's an inconsistent and a lack of attention to detail and sort of doing the follow-up that the Americans are not displaying. And a misunderstanding. So these days, diplomacy is so ineffective that before you kind of stop, I mean, with all the satellite imagery, with all the capacity, no one could actually ring up al-Sharaa and say, from the Americans, you have to stop your guys. From my understanding, one of the issues of the misunderstanding, but it remains to be confirmed, that when the Israelis met with al-Sharaa, it seems al-Sharaa and his allies thought that they understood that Israel would give them a bit of a green light if al-Sharaa would sort of give up a bit on the Golan. That's some of the rumors that's actually circulating about people that were around these negotiations.
And then
maybe that's the misunderstanding that happened. So because before, in April and in May, al-Sharaa did not deploy to in the same way to Sweida, because it was understood that it was an Israeli red line. Why did he suddenly think 4 or 5 days ago that the red line was no longer there? You know, some people say he was trapped. I don't know. I mean, he clearly misread.
That would need
I don't want to take away from his direct responsibility for not having an inclusive process, but I think we need to take away that there are a lot of regional international sponsors that went very silent the last 3 or 4 days, and that's very worrisome for the transition.
Reda Mansour, you heard there Nadim Houri alluding to remarks that were made a few days back by Donald Trump's envoy, who comes from the real estate world in New York City, like himself, Tom Barak, who basically undercut the Kurdish-led SDF's call for more regional autonomy in the north of the country. For Syria, which is best, a central model or a more federal model?
Well, I want to tell you, first of all, that my feeling lately with Barak is that he should be recalled very quickly to Washington. because he's been showing this great fascination in al-Sharaa and in this new government. Zero criticism for anything that they does. He just like fell in love with this new government. He even suggested that Lebanon maybe should be a part of Syria. The guy is a little bit, I don't know where he's floating in some spheres that I don't understand. He's not being constructive and helpful for minorities in Syria and Lebanon lately, and I hope that he wake up from this. He's more look like a groupie of al-Sharaa than a serious diplomat trying to solve problems.
So if you're
now
the
in
United
Syria,
States,
I can tell
what do
you.
you do? Do you want a system that's more federal, where you have more regional autonomy, or you want a centralized state? Which will be better for minorities?
I think the request of the minorities is very clear. They don't want really autonomies or federalism in the full sense of the word. But al-Sharaa is pushing them to that direction. They have been asking to decentralize the country. For example, one of the first mistakes that he did when Assad fell, the Druze leadership in Sweida appointed a young lady to be the governor of the province. Very modern, very educated, very good public figure. Instead of accepting her and understanding that he can give them some flexibility, he brought his own person and forced him to be the governor of Sweida. So give them a little bit space. That's all what they're asking. Decentralization. Why can't the governor of Sweida be a Druze? The deputy governor can be one of al-Sharaa people. Why the governor of the north in the Kurdish area can't be Kurdish? And appoint a deputy governor who is from your people, from al-Sharaa group. Give the minorities a feeling that they can start building trust with you. Show them some respect. Give them a little bit time. They are out of 14 years of civil war. So I think I don't understand sometimes this need to centralize everything in Damascus. This need to show that this is only Sunni operation. His supporters are demonstrating in cities saying Sunni, imhed Druze al-Alawi, Sunnis, we will wipe the Druze and the Alawis. You have to start changing the culture on the ground.
Let me ask, because we're running short on time, so I just want to ask very quickly, because we have 1 minute left. Dana Albaz, on this point, right now, after what's just happened, can we expect change from Ahmed Alshara?
I don't know if you can expect change, but as Nadim was saying, the great question and the big question now, how would the new authorities build a trust with the society in Syria, with the different components in Syria, not only minorities, but with the whole society, with the civil society? How do new authorities can rebuild this trust, and how can the process of transitional justice start in Syria? This is the big question now.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. Dana Albaz, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Nadim Houri, Samir Aita, Reda Mansour for joining us from Israel. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.